So, thinking back on what you just said about changes that you've experienced since you've been on the machine, this being your ninth session, it seemed that um, some of the largest areas that have changed for you is emotionally. Would that be a fair observation?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that's where I feel like the most release has taken place is on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of energy, a lot of discharge,
Mm-hmm.
and but also a lot of physical change.
Mm-hmm.
There was a period of, you know, I had kind of gone out of being in a more continual state of fight or flight. So I would have periods of time when I'd feel like old feelings of fight or flight coming out, and I'd feel it in my shoulders and my arms and my legs, that
Yeah.
ready to run feeling.
Mm.
And there was a period of about 2 weeks, and it was following, doing some house painting and some power washing, so it could have been somewhat of a strain on the muscles from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't feel like that. It felt like for about 2 weeks, I was letting go of contracted energies relative to fight or flight. And then at a certain point, they just released. And all the pain just went away. So it was really uncomfortable for 2 weeks, really uncomfortable in my shoulders. And then it was gone,
Mm.
just gone. And I've noticed changes in my digestive system, and I always associated kind of poor digestion with that fight or flight response, and my understanding of how that fight or flight response cuts off information from the digestive system because it wants all that blood in the arms and legs so you can fight or flee. So if you're in more of a constant state of fight or flight where you really see the world as attacking you and that you've got to defend, and if you're in kind of that kind of thinking, then then I think people who live out of that fight or flight have a tendency to not have as good digestion.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so I had a long period of time where my digestion was okay, but I would say over the last few weeks, I've noticed myself eating differently.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm eating more consciously. I feel like I'm eating slower.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's less kind of an addiction to eating, and more of just an awareness of my body needing food and me putting it in.
Mm-hmm.
My choices have been better lately as well, and my whole digestive tract seems to be functioning at a higher level. So those have been real noticeable for me, because
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe because of the being in fight or flight for so long,
Mm-hmm.
that may be why I created some of the reactivity I had to some of the foods that I ate.
Wow.
And so, but I, was diagnosed by a naturopath
Mm-hmm.
as having both gluten and dairy sensitivities. So I've not had dairy for the most part in, probably 4 months, and gluten, not much in the way of gluten for the last 6 or 8 months,
Mm-hmm.
at least, and probably not too much gluten for the last 6 or 7 years. But I would say there's been an improvement in my intestinal function. Like since I've been working with this machine, my entire organ system seems to be working at a higher level.
Mm.
So I'm getting some physiological response, definitely emotional response, and then I would say mental. I've seen a lot of change in terms of my thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would say I used to perceive the world as more of a threat
Mm-hmm.
and would react to the world as
Mhm.
if it were a threat because I perceived it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there's a lot going on in the world and a lot of things happening in different places with different people, I've not felt that feeling of being threatened, like the world's threatening me. So that seems to have gone away. So on a mental level, I find myself much more able to be quiet. I don't have to be out as much. I used to feel like I needed social interaction. I need to be out talking with people. I need to be interacting with people. And I found that actually just the opposite desire, especially over the past few weeks. The desire to be by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I was always kind of comfortable being by myself, but I was always busy when I was by myself. And now I'm comfortable being not busy.
Yeah.
So I have periods of time where I just sit and not even thinking about things, just, sitting in the woods and looking at trees and listening to owls and experiencing the world more. And I
Mhm.
think when a person's in fight or flight, they just notice what they need to notice.
Mm-hmm.
They don't notice, the broad perspective of what's going on, because it's like, is anything here a threat? Do I
Mhm.
perceive a threat? And of course, if you're in fight or flight, you perceive everything as a threat.
Right.
So every person's a threat, every interaction's somewhat threatening. And so that's why I think I felt like I needed to control conversations and where we went, because I didn't want it to fire me off and bring my stuff up and, have to deal with that intensity. And it seems like that intensity just isn't there. And really hasn't been there for a few weeks now.
Mm-hmm.
There's periods of time where I feel like something's releasing.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the day or two after a session, I find those are really critical days. Because with that expanded energy, there's a tendency for me to feel uncomfortable, for a day or two, and then get used to it, and then kind of grounded in, and then feel more comfortable. So that first day or two seems to be kind of critical periods of time for me to just be really present. And I found the last few weeks, it's been easier and easier to just be present.
Mm-hmm. Great. Great.